Today we're looking at solving quadratic equations by factoring. And when we talk about a quadratic equation, we've been working with quadratic functions that look like this, if they're in standard form. So there's a y. Now we're going to be looking at equations where we've got ax squared plus bx plus c, but now it's going to be equal to 0 on the other side. And if the equation isn't in that form, then we have to change it so that it is in that form. So we need to move everything over to one side and make it equal to 0 in order to solve it. And because it's an equation, it means that there are answers for x which make that left side equal 0. So since these equations have an x squared, or we also say that that's a degree of 2, that means that there are 2 answers for x. Now, there may be some equations that aren't possible to solve, so they would have no answers. Sometimes our 2 answers will be the same answer, which really means that we have 1 answer. But we'll discuss that more. So to solve for the 2 possible x values, the first thing we're going to do is factor the ax squared plus bx plus c. Then we're going to make each bracket equal to 0 once we've factored. And then we're going to solve each of those equations that we created in step 2. So this will make a little bit more sense once we do some examples. Now let's just start with this whole idea. So if we have an equation a times b equals 0, what do we know about a and b? Well, if 2 numbers multiply to give 0, like they do here, then one number must be 0. Okay, so that's a fact. If we're multiplying 2 things together and their answer is 0, then one of the values of those 2 numbers has to be 0. So that means, in this case then, if a times b equals 0, so then we know that a equals 0 or b equals 0. And that concept is basically the concept that we're using in solving these quadratic equations by factoring. So here's an example. This quadratic equation is already factored for us here. So it's like this first bracket is our a, and this second bracket is our b. So if these 2 brackets multiply together to give 0, then that means either the first bracket equals 0 or the second bracket equals 0. So down below here, I can write x plus 5 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0. Now I want to know what value of x makes both things 0, so I just solve each of these equations. So that means that x is equal to negative 5, or x is equal to 3. Okay? So let's take a look at some actual examples here. We'll do the factoring as well for our first step. Okay? So here's a list of our steps again. So first thing we need to make sure is that it's rearranged, and everything on this equation in A, everything's over on the left side equal to 0, so that's fine. Now we need to factor. So in this case, if you remember back to your factoring, this is difference of squares. We've got 2 terms and they're both perfect squares. So if we were to factor that, we're going to get x plus 4, x minus 4 equals 0. So that's the factoring step. Now we're going to make each bracket equal to 0. So down below here, I'm going to write x plus 4 equals 0, or x x minus 4 equals 0. So that means that x equals negative 4. From this equation, when I move the plus 4 over, it's going to become negative 4. Or x equals positive 4 in that equation. So there are the two possible answers for x that make this equation true. All right, in B here, we've got a simple trinomial. So we're trying to find two numbers that multiply to give 6 and add to give negative 5. Okay, so that's going to be negative 3 and negative 2 that will satisfy that. So that means that in our two brackets, we're going to get x minus 3 and x minus 2 equals 0. And then I set each bracket equal to 0. So either x minus 3 equals 0 or x minus 2 equals 0. So that means that x equals 3 or x equals 2 for that one. Okay, so two steps really. The first step is just factoring, like we've done before. And the second step is just solving each bracket equal to 0. So in this one here, you can see that we need to arrange these so that all the terms are on one side. And when you arrange, you want to arrange it so that the A value is positive. So right now our A value is 6 in front of the x squared, and it's already positive. So I'm going to move everything over with the 6x squared. So 6x squared, then the x term has to come next, so minus 7x is changing to plus 7x, and then 5 changes to minus 5. So I get it in this form. So now I've got a complex trinomial. So we're going to do our A, C, B over here. Remember, I need two numbers underneath the A that multiply to give 6. So I'm going to go with 2 and 3. I need two numbers underneath the C that multiply to give 5. So 1 and 5. And then I'll check what signs I need on the 1 and 5 here. So 3 times 1 is going to give me 3. 2 times 5 is going to give me 10. I need those numbers to make positive 7. So that means it's got to be a positive 10 and a negative 3 that will give me positive 7. So if this 3 is negative, that means this 1 has to be negative. And if this 10 is positive, then that 5 has to be positive. So remember, there are the two brackets for us. So in one bracket, we're going to get 2x minus 1. And in the other bracket, we're going to get 3x plus 5. And then once we get here, now we say that 2x minus 1 equals 0, or 3x plus 5 equals 0. Okay, so there's an extra step now when we solve these, because we're going to get 2x equals 1, so x equals 1 half when we divide by 2, or on this side we get 3x equals negative 5, so x is equal to negative 5 over 3. So those are the two possible answers for that. Okay, this one here we can common factor. You can see that both terms have an x. So I'm going to take an x out in front, and I get 5x minus 8 when I common factor that. Now when we have just one bracket and then this x out in front, that x is still one of the things that is multiplying. So we just bring that down like it's a bracket and say x equals 0 or 5x minus 8 equals 0. Okay? So I need to do some work with this 5x minus 8 equals 0. So 5x equals 8. X equals 8 over 5. So that means it's x equals 0 or x equals 8 over 5. Okay, this one here. Again, we can common factor, but this time it's just a 2 that we can factor out of those two terms. Okay, and now you can see that what we have in the bracket here is a difference of squares. So I'm going to go ahead and do that step as well. So I'm going to get x plus 8 and x minus 8 for that part in the bracket. Okay, so in this case, there's no x out here with the 2, so we don't have to write a fraction like we did up here when there was an x. It's only the x parts that we have to write equations for. So the x plus 8 equals 0, and the x minus 8 equals 0. So x is going to equal negative 8, or x will equal 8. And remember, when we get these answers, if we substitute either one of these numbers in here for x, it'll make that equation true. It'll make it equal to 0. Okay, and one more here. X squared. I'm going to bring over the minus 2x, make it a plus 2x. So here I'm trying to find two numbers that multiply to negative 4 and add to 2. But there are no numbers that work there. So that means that it's not factorable. Okay? So the last example we'll do tomorrow in class. We'll see you then.